The Malazan Empire began in an island called Malaz. It was a pirate's nest, where its main source of income came from raiding the main Kontale continent. This sort of trade made them bitter rivals with another neighboring state called the Napan Isles. When it came to formal recognition as countries, only the Napan Isles was deemed worthy by the various kingdoms of Kontale. Unlike Malaz, the Napan Isles was structured like a real country, with a king and queen and a political body named the Council responsible for governing the country. It also had a formal military, or in their case a naval military, and had laws and regulations for civil rule. Malaz Island, on the other hand, was described as a den of thieves and outlaws, and they had no formal laws or regulations, and thus no formal legal body to govern the country. It was ruled by a pirate admiral called Mok, who had placated all the pirate captains in the island in working for him. His rule involved playing the other captains against each other, and in the main island he had a partner, a crime boss by the name Geffen, who he sold all the stolen loot to. If one was trying to create a country, the obvious choice was Malaz, and that is where Kelavind and Dansa set their roots after the exile from Liheng. In the time that Kelavind and Dansa settled in Malaz, the Napan Isles had gone through a civil crisis due to leadership wrangles. Princess Suarez, the rightful ruler of the Napan Isles, had been deposed by her brother Tarel, who had garnered support from majority of the country's ruling council. Princess Suarez and her followers were able to escape, and they retreated to their neighboring island Malaz. Kelavind and Dansa first purchased a small pub called Smiley's, and it's in this establishment that we first meet Sally, the fake name for Princess Suarez, who was pretending to be a barmaid at the time. This is another instance of fate, as Sally became Empress Lassine in the later days of the empire. Sally's second-in-command was an experienced Napan commander known as Catharon Crust. He was later named High Fist when Kelavind took over the island, making him the first person to ever receive that title in the Malazan Empire. Catharon had a brother called Ako, who is a legendary Malazan captain that came to be known for his strength, and we get a glimpse of that during a brief skirmish between Ako and a Hound of Shadow. Dansa and Kelavind set Sally and her people to work. They had two objectives. One was to infiltrate the pirate command under Mok, and second, to take over the criminal underworld and depose Geffen as the leading crime boss of the island. In order to accomplish this, Kelavind acquired a cursed ship named the Twisted and gave its command to Catharon Crust. Sally, on the other hand, used her other followers to undermine and take over different criminal establishments under Geffen. Tarel, Sally's brother, knew that she was in Malaz Island, and he made a plan to get her by proposing to Mok that both their nations should raid the main continent. Mok, in his stupidity, agreed to this and left with his three main man-o'-wars together with all his pirate captains, leaving the island undefended. This move turned to be a betrayal by the Napans, and Mok lost two of his ships that day, including most of his other forces. He was able to escape, but the damage had already been done. His reputation was in shambles, and to criminals, reputation is everything. It's in Mok's life that we get to meet Tatasel, the future High Mage of the Empire. At the time, she was his mistress, as well as a mage using the Warren of Rus, or Sea, and she was the main reason that Mok's remaining fleet was able to escape. After this massive failure by Mok as a pirate, as well as his lackluster behavior in cheating on Tatasel, she left him, losing all respect she had for him. He later killed himself by falling to his death from a window in his hold. Tatasel did not join the empire then. She left for the main continent after deciding to go to the old Untan mage schools to learn battle magics. During the fall of Mok, Geffen the crime boss decided to take all his things and relocate to Mok's hold in order to depose him. This failed very quickly as he was assassinated by Kaul, the future High Mage of the Crimson Guard. As all these events were taking place, Dasemalta, the mortal sword of Hood, arrived in Malaz Island, where he had been sent by Hood. This was because he wanted to save a sick child he carried around with him, and who had made a promise to delay her death until he traveled to that island. This was a very fortunate outcome for both Dasem and his future employers, Dancer and Kelavin. The island had an Azad house, and time worked differently inside the buildings. When Kelavin broke into the Azad house, the house recognizes him, and from that point onwards, he is able to get into the house without a problem. This allowed him to place the sick child into the house until the time they could find a cure for her ailment. With this task done, Dasem agreed to work for them, and because of his efforts, they were able to repel the Napan soldiers that had come for Sally. It's in this skirmish that Dasem's name rises, and great fear and respect is afforded him by all that know his accomplishments. Dasem took upon himself to guard a bridge alone against hundreds of Napan soldiers. He dispatched every single one of them without a wound to his body or even a tinge of exhaustion. He would have continued if a truce had not been made between himself and a Napan captain. This fight was witnessed by a girl called Lee, who was Geffen's second in command. She was turned to silence by that display of martial skill. She had grown weary of meaningless work under Geffen, and when opportunity arose after Geffen's assassination, she joined the Malazans under Sally's command. We later meet Lee in the future as she takes up the name of Oppo. Lee, or Opal, was one of the first Claw recruits under Sally. Under Catharon Crass' command, we meet her younger Dujek and Jack, and we later see Jack getting his legendary moniker, Whiskey Jack, from Catharon. Dasem Alta was critical in the creation and training of the Malazan military, and he was vital in creating its guidelines and practices followed ever since. He commanded great respect from the Malazan recruits and soldiers due to his legendary martial prowess. The other important figure we meet during this time is Teskren. He was a high priest of the cult of Drake and second only to the demi-Drake in command. This cult was located in the Katul Island, which is another island that is a neighbor to Malaz. He ended up in Malaz after escaping his execution due to political upheavals in that religious order, and was saved by Kelavin from pursuing priests of Drake. He was the one responsible for the creation of mage cadres that exist in the Malazan military command. The Talons, the children talents that Kelavin and Dancer recruited, officially begin their work as espionage agents. He tells them to infiltrate every kingdom in the Kontali continent, and whatever they learn, they report immediately back to him using the Scar Warren, which he showed them how to access it. The Scar Warren is later adopted by the Claws, and it's the one we see being used by Claw agents to travel in the main Malazan books. It's later called the Imperial Warren. We also see other important mages like Hairlock and Carlot. Hairlock was recruited by Dancer during their time in Skullcap Mine, while Carlot was saved by Teskren from a Dalhorn execution. An old retired mage of the old Italian legions called Nedurian, who at the time had made a home in Malaz, joined the Bardin Empire. He was responsible for the formation of the Malazan system of integrating mages into squads with normal soldiers. This system is part of the reason the Malazan military was so strong. In that time, many kingdoms in the Kontali continent used mages sparingly, and when they were used, they worked alone and distanced themselves from the other soldiers. This Malazan system was revolutionary, as each squad had one or two powerful mages that allowed them to accomplish greater feats and even survive the most dangerous battlefields. After Kelavin took over the rule of Malaz Island, he set his sights on the Napan Isles. Sally was able to take her throne without much contest because of her great skill in subterfuge, and she exiled her brother so that he could not have any more influence on the Napan ruling council. With the Napan Isles under their control through Sally, it was time to move towards the long campaign of subjugating the Kontali continent under Malazan rule. In the time, the Kontali continent was undergoing great changes. In the previous year, the forces of Itko Khan had been decimated by the protectress Shalmanat. In her final attack, they had also lost their king Chulalon III, as well as most members of their Nightblade Order. By the time the Malazans were preparing to move on the continent, Itko Khan had lost their regent as well as future king, a boy by the name of Chulalon IV. Their political and military structure was in shambles, and it was the first target by Kelavin after he took Liheng. Before taking Liheng, Kelavin reawakened the Tilanimas when he found the throne of Bon. He did not want to confront Shalmanat, despite her weakened state, and he decided to set the Imas upon her. She fled when the Imas threatened her with death. He also attacked the city with his powerful mages, Tiskren and Sister Night, as well as releasing the Hounds of Shadow upon the city. The remaining mages under Shalmanat were defeated, and some like Silk, Koro, and Mara fled, while Hodala was taken to Skullcap Mine as a prisoner. When Kelavin took Liheng, he declared himself emperor under the old Italian rules, which stated that if one figure had rulership of more than 2 kingdoms, then their country was an empire, and thus their ruler an emperor. At this time, Kelavin ruled Malaz Island, the Napan Isles, Korn, and now Liheng, the city-state. During this time, the kingdoms of Blua and Greece were at war. It's during this war that some kingdoms are taken by Malazan forces, leading to the chaotic final day of battle that led to the Crimson Guard losing most of its forces. We meet another old guard member, Gremen, who at the time was known as Ojin Samhir. He was working for the Queen of Purge, but he was later betrayed by her after saving them from Kon and Tali forces. His army is hounded by the Talian Iron Legion to near decimation. If not for a spy working for Kelavin embedded himself in their forces, they would have been killed to the last man. They were saved by Admiral Chos under the orders of the Emperor, and this is how Greymen joined the Malazans. When Kelavin and Dancer were stranded in the Stratum continent, they met a stranded Morand battalion. This battalion was led by a captain called Twist, who we later see in the main Malazan books during the Malazan campaign in Ganabakis continent. They are recruited by Kelavin as payment for being rescued from that horrible continent. The other reason Kelavin decided to move on Itkokan was because they had lost a major powerful mage known as Jadine. She lost her life in the hold of Tellus when she thought herself the ruler of the Tilanimas after finding the throne of Bone before Kelavin. She orders them to take their heads, but is decapitated instead by Unus Tulan of the Logros Tilanimas. It's in that scene that Kelavin realizes the Imas cannot be ordered like normal subjects. You have to request them, and they can agree or disagree to follow said requests. To control the Imas, you have to act more like a chief than a king. A king orders while a chief requests. With all those conditions and powerful forces under Emperor Kelavin, there was nothing to stand in his way in taking over the Kontali continent. It was a foregone conclusion at that time. I know this has been a somewhat long video, and I'm glad you listened to the end. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.